And this evening, we have Executive Chef Rick Mace from his new restaurant, Tropical Smokehouse. He's a fantastic chef, and enjoy your evening. And if you have any question as we go along, please don't hesitate. He'll answer to all your tricky questions. Have fun.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for coming out on a Monday. Keep the weekend rolling. We got the holidays rapidly approaching. As Diane and Carl mentioned, we just opened a restaurant this year in downtown West Palm. But I've been cooking in Palm Beach County since 2013. And I had the good run at Cafe Baloo, where I was the executive chef there for all of those years. And I haven't been out here in a couple of years. And pulling up for the first time, it dawned on me that, like, you know, we've all kind of been in a different habit, a different pace of life since the pandemic struck. And it's nice to have an opportunity to be together with you and have an intimate kind of setting like this. And it'll be, you know, things like this that we remember more so than, you know, the routine of going out as frequently as we used to, I think, beforehand. So thank you for, you know, making the night tonight. So the menu that we're going to do tonight is kind of a fusion of some kind of rustic technique and incorporating as much as I can all of the beautiful produce from the farm into the menu. The new restaurant that we opened is a smokehouse. So we're kind of putting our Florida spin on some smoked fish and barbecue and burgers. We're not really doing kind of the Southern or Texas style barbecue, so I didn't want to come out tonight and do how to smoke ribs kind of demo. So I wanted to kind of keep it a little bit more you know, fresh and light. So we're going to start tonight with making a chilled soup. One of the favorite things of mine in the fall is to work with all of those root vegetables that are planted in the late summer that are, you know, ready this time of year. So we're going to play with some turnips, and my aim is to show you some really easy technique that you can employ at home that's rapid and also convenient, so that it's not real prep intensive, doesn't require a lot of specialized equipment or time. From there, we're going to do a salad with some grains. I have some freca, which is a cracked wheat, like an heirloom style wheat, that we'll incorporate into a salad that'll follow the soup. And then the meat we'll do tonight is smoked chicken. So we'll demo how to prep chicken for the grill or the smoker and be able to finish it over some of these beautiful vegetables and incorporate that all together in a sauce. And then it's pumpkin season, so we brought the calabaza squash and made a empanada with cheese, cream cheese, and roast pumpkin inside with some brown sugar. So we're going to be doing all those things. So as we are getting underway, if I could introduce our lovely assistants in the back. This is my wife Siobhan and my daughter Gwendolyn. And they've been here with me most every time that I've cooked at Kai Kai, so it's kind of old hat for them, but I'm really grateful that they're here tonight as well. So they'll be helping to get the food ready to send out as I'm working through the demo. So we'll go ahead and get started. The pace of the thing is a little bit for me to get used to, so I'm going to try and not talk too much and do a little bit of hands-on. If I stop talking and you guys are curious as to what I'm doing, just blurt it out. Anything that you might want to say or ask. So the soup, we're going to do a technique that is you know, something that I learned right on the heels of culinary school, to roast beets, and that's making foil packets. It's a very old technique if you call it en papillote, which the French like to cook things like fillet of fish and things like that wrapped in a piece of paper. But it's actually a very practical method, and it conserves moisture in a high heat environment. So what we're going to do is use this big piece of foil, and then we have some of these beautiful turnips, which, I mean, they're sweet enough you could eat like an apple right now. But we're going to clean those, and then use a little bit of potato to give some body, and some onion. And I wrote some recipes. I don't know if you have them now or you're getting them later. In the recipe I mentioned that if you have a food processor, now is the perfect time to use it. Because anything that's going to go into the blender really doesn't need to be very well cut in terms of, you know, taking your time to make a perfect dice. So we have the baby turnip bottoms. We're going to take a couple Idaho potatoes. I forgot my peeler. So just going to rip through this really quickly. This soup is equally good warm, and it would be excellent with some crispy bacon bits on top and a warm piece of cornbread. But I think a chilled soup is nice and light and refreshing. The important thing is that we want to cut this stuff up relatively small so that it's fast cooking. And the more time we spend cutting it, the less time it'll need to cook. If you are going to use a grill to do this, or if you have a Traeger smoker, that type of, you know, an enclosed smoker, you would want medium-high heat. If you're going to do it on a gas grill and you have multiple burners, turn the back burner on and pull this towards the front. Basically would be the route. So what I like to do with the potato is basically line it out into some baton, they call, big French fry, like that. And then this step is a little tedious, but if we're going to thinly slice it, it'll make it cook very quickly. One of the first soups that I learned how to make when I was, and I don't even want to tell you how long ago that was, but when I was in cooking school in Vermont, the founding chef of New England Culinary Institute, Michel Leborgne, one of his famous demos was potato leek soup. And basically what he wanted to do was preserve the freshness of the leek by making the potato cook as quickly as the leek. So he would cut the leeks thinly sliced, and then he would show you to cut the potato exactly like this, so that when you combine the two, it allows that to cook quickly enough that the soup stays a nice vibrant color, and you keep the freshness of the leek. And that technique kind of always stuck with me. So I think that's enough potato. So I have a big piece of foil here. We're just going to run this down the middle just to start a bed. And then these turnips, it's kind of a shame that they're so small. You could definitely make this soup with large turnips, but as they get larger, they tend to get a lot more spicy. A little bit of bitterness to them. So these are going to be nice and sweet. We're going to slice this thinly. We sent some barbecue salmon dip out for you guys to enjoy. We smoke a lot of fish at the restaurant, so we usually have our house fish dip is usually based off of kingfish. But then I've been playing with some wahoo and some salmon belly to make some other fish dips, so I thought you would enjoy a little snack while I'm cooking.
It's delicious. Yes.
Well, I was just thinking that, you know, I'm a better cooker than a talker, so I hope you enjoy it. We're going to use a small onion. And we're going to just layer this all together. I have some whole butter. I cooked some of this in advance to see how fast it would cook on the grill. And initially I had in mind to brown the butter before I added it to the vegetables. But the grill outside it cooks pretty quickly, and I think it does a good enough job. If you have low heat to where things are just kind of simmering along, if you brown the butter in advance, it'll just give a little bit more flavor. So we're going to lay out a little bit of salt and not too much pepper, because that turnip already has that lovely pepperiness. And then I brought some nutmeg. Nutmeg is best if you have one of those microplanes in your kitchen. Just keep a nutmeg in your spice drawer, and it'll stay good for forever if you grate it when you need it. We buy a lot of nutmeg at the restaurant because we make jerk marinade and a couple other spice blends, and we're doing pumpkin pie spice and all that stuff now. So this is pre-ground, but microplane and a whole nutmeg is really the way to go for the home kitchen. So what I'm going to do is just close this up, make sure that it's nice and tight, kind of make a big snake, and something like this. So if you were on the gas grill at home, open the grill, burner in the back, bring this up to the front, close the grill, and just let that cook. What you're looking for is this just to all be tender inside, and I have one in the back that we did already. So for those of you that are counting, I've only made 2 dirty dishes so far, a cutting board and a knife. Okay. I'm trying to give you some Monday night meal tips, okay? We're going to remove this just from the foil packet and into the blender. If you use a blender at home with any frequency whatsoever, I really like these commercial blenders. They're called VitaPrep. I've been using them for a long time as a chef, and they claim to be the fastest blender, but they're also the slowest blender. So you can do anything from, pureeing a soup to just leaving something kind of a rustic texture, like if you're working with tomato, peppers, eggplant, that type of thing, and you're making salsas. You blast the same idea if you do it in the foil, or you can do it directly on the grill. Grill up your tomato, tomatillo, onion, garlic, chilies, all of that, and toss into the blender. And then just run it on slow, and it'll make you a nice chunky texture. But in this case, we're going to hit it to make the puree. You're in the splash zone, just so you know. Is actually Maggi, so it's a bouillon cube. These I usually get at Food Town, and they're kind of like soft and pliable, so you can crumble them between your fingers. It's a lot less salty than the Knorr bouillon cubes, the little squares. And these, if you crumble them, you can use them as seasoning to rub it on things. I also like to use them when I cook vegetables. If you have time to make chicken stock, please do. In this particular soup, it would be good with vegetable stock, chicken stock. If you made a bacon stock, if you have a ham hock, a smoked turkey leg, something like that. Roux vegetable typically play nicely also with shellfish, so if you had a shrimp stock, it would also be delicious here. But for the sake of expediency and convenience, I don't think these are really beatable. So as you can see, the soup now at this point is pureed. If I were working in a refined environment such as a French restaurant, I would now strain this about 13 times through a fine mesh. You want to check it for salt. And then I was looking for my buttermilk or my wife or my daughter, but I don't see any of those 3 things. But we would put a little splash of buttermilk in at the end. You could also use creme fraiche. And at the house, I actually use a lot of Greek yogurt just because it gives that kind of a little bit of acidity. And as long as you're using a high-speed blender like that, even yogurt, you can get it to emulsify fully. Sometimes yogurt has a tendency to curdle a little bit in a hot preparation, but yogurt actually works pretty well if you have a fast enough blender. Aha! Perfect. That's perfect. So it's not really a cream-based soup. It's actually, the soup is based on stock, and it gets all of its texture from the, this is so sad. We're gonna make it.
The solids are the best part.
But all that you really need is a little touch to finish. And I left that, I believe in the recipe, I left that noted that, you know, it's optional. And that's all you would really need to do. This buttermilk is very difficult to find. I've been hounding a couple of my purveyors that this is from Mayaca City here in Florida. And it's called Dakin is the farm that comes from. But it's really good churned buttermilk that's kind of thick and really nice to make hush puppies and cornbread and all that type of thing with. So the soup is done at this point. If you wanted to serve it hot, you basically could put it in a pot and bring it up. If you wanted to serve it chilled, you could put it in a bowl into the refrigerator and chill it, make it in advance either way, and then heat it or serve it cold at that point. You could do this a day ahead, no problem. Okay, to serve that, we're going to put it in a small cup. And some hand-torn basil is really good with the soup. The turnip and basil play really nicely together. But what we have from the farm is some sorrel. And sorrel is full of, they call, I think, oxalic acid. It's kind of a sour, tart kind of lemon flavor. So we would take a little bit of this and then just stack the leaves up and shred it with a knife. They call this a chiffonade is the technique, but basically to cut into thin strips. And just place that on top as you are sending it out. So that would be the garnish. I'll go ahead and reset and we'll send soup, and then we'll start to work through getting the salad prep set up as you guys are enjoying the soup, and we'll get back underway. An herb salad is more Middle Eastern than anything else, and one of my favorite salads is a fattoush. So that's basically torn toasted pita with the same type of setup there: lemon, pomegranate, molasses, parsley, tomato, onion. So that's kind of the idea of using all these fall ingredients to do the same thing. Lastly, we're going to open this up a little bit more. Thing that I wanted to talk about is basically a simple salad setup. On a technical level, there's a couple things that we're going to address. The first one will be to make a basic vinaigrette just by hand in a bowl with a whisk. Very easy to do. And then I also brought this guy. How many of you have one of these at home? I was going to say, I always follow that up with, how many of you are scared to use it? Yeah. So these things are incredibly good at saving time until you put your finger in it, and then all the time you save is out the window. But they are a really practical tool. They cost about 20 bucks. And in the home kitchen especially, it's really helpful to be able to churn out things very efficiently. So I basically have 3 different elements of the salad that we're going to use the slicer for. So I'll go ahead and do that first, and then we'll set it aside and make the vinaigrette and combine it into the salad. The other parts of the salad are going to just be some fresh picked herbs. This is just a blend of parsley, cilantro, and dill. We're going to use a little bit of fresh pomegranate kernel, which are in the markets right about now. Usually as you get closer to Thanksgiving, you'll see these flooded everywhere. You can find this year-round. This makes a really good salad dressing. And then the other piece that I have is the freca, which is a cracked wheat. This is kind of a wheat that's, you know, from the time of antiquity. They used to raise this in the South, and basically they would burn the wheat and thresh it after it was burnt while it was still green enough that it wouldn't completely char. And basically that would give it kind of a distinct flavor. I'm buying this from a family-owned mill in Edisto Island called Marsh Hen Mill. If you guys buy any kind of stone ground grits, cornmeal, these types of things, Sea Island peas, hit up their website. We buy from them for the restaurant, and I've bought from them for years before. Super good family-owned business. So basically this gets cooked 1 cup per 2.5 cups of water. and it's just cooked in salted water. So I have that simply prepared here. Okay, so those are all of our elements. We'll go ahead and process. The first thing that I wanted to make, I know the pressure's on. Am I going to cut myself now that I made the joke? So vegetables, especially crunchy vegetables, carrots, radishes, daikon, all of those types of things. They can be really pleasing to have in a salad, but they can also be a little bit heavy to where they're too much, they're too toothsome. So one of my favorite things to do with these crunchy vegetables is just shave them very thinly. So we're gonna just dial this in to where it's barely going to slice. It'll take me a minute to calibrate it. And this thing comes with a guard when you buy it. Please use it.
You don't use the radish greens?
The greens are great to use. You certainly can. In this context, I chose not to. I would say if I were going to use radish greens, you certainly can use them in a salad. They can be like fiery hot radish greens. They're excellent for saute and braise. So if you wanted to fold that into the veg of the chicken, or if you wanted to use that in a quick saute also, radish greens are excellent for that. They certainly kind of intensify the flavor of the radish. So as you can see, super thin. You can kind of see through it. And so that's basically, we have some French breakfast radish, and then in the mixture that we're actually plating, we have some watermelon radish as well. But just dial in very, very thin, and then just make some thin slices, and that's going to give you a really nice texture. The next thing we're going to do is open this up a little bit more and make some slices with it. So shavings and then slices. And the way that I like to do the cucumber is that I'll cut them into 4, cut the half, and then I'll just kind of hold this, and at a bias, I'll just run this through here. If you want it thicker, it's good, but just keep in mind that you want things that fit on a fork and that aren't too complicated to chew, unless you're getting into a knife and fork salad situation. Okay, so run that through, and you can see very quickly I'm able to make a nice pile of really uniform slices of cucumber. Hopefully it's good and sharp. And we're going to actually cut some planks for the grill. Zucchini, yellow squash, eggplant, all of those types of things. If you can open this up a little bit and just run them through carefully, 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 carefully. When you can't feel it anymore. If you leave the skin in the back of the last slices thick, that's still fine. It's going to eat perfectly well. So I did this in advance. Cut this, and then oil, salt, and pepper, and I charred it on the grill outside, just on both sides quickly. These, the Asian variety of eggplant, like they're really, I think they're like some of the best eating ones, and they cook very quick, and you want to take it off before it gets completely cooked through, because then it's going to get a little more watery. If you want to keep that meatiness of it, you cook it quickly. You don't want that kind of soft, silky texture of like an eggplant parmesan kind of thing in a salad. So you're going to cook that quickly. Grilling, or if you have one of the Blackstones, the flat grills, turn that thing all the way up, sear on both sides. That's another beautiful way to do that. So we have the three elements that we prepared here: shavings, slices, and planks, as we discussed to do this on the grill. And we're going to go ahead and make a simple vinaigrette now. A lot of people buy all their salad dressings, and that's great, but I don't think many of them taste real good. And to have all of the things to make them in your pantry, they're all, pretty versatile. So different vinegars, different oils. I got it up now. Now we're cooking with gas. But all of these ingredients you can use for a lot of different things in the kitchen. So to have what you need to make a vinaigrette, most people already have. So we're going to start with a little splash of the pomegranate juice. This is a limited edition crooked top bottle. You got to drop it off the back of your truck to get that. We're going to use a little bit of cider vinegar. You could use red wine vinegar, white wine vinegar, champagne vinegar. I like apple cider vinegar. We use it a lot at the restaurant. A little shot of mustard. Dijon is great. This is a Creole mustard, which is like a coarse mustard. It's not as coarse as a stone ground. It's kind of a little smoother. So a little shot of that, and the mustard is actually going to help mix the vinaigrette up and keep it emulsified, they call it, keep it in suspension. So we have all of those elements there, and then the last thing we're going to do, somebody gifted this to me recently, and I was super excited to try it. Mike's Hot Honey infused with chilies. Okay, so I usually put a little piece of honey in my vinaigrettes, almost always. But the fact that I have now one that's got a little kick to it, super appealing. Okay, so just by whisk, we're going to first incorporate the base. And this isn't going to be a creamy dressing that's verging on an aioli or a mayonnaise that you're going to have to work really hard for. This is going to be super easy. So using your free hand, just slowly pour this in. If you have a blender, turn the blender on with that in it, on low with the lid off. If you like to live dangerously, and then drizzle the oil in. You can also do this in your Cuisinart or your food processor. Put all of that vinegar and whatnot in the bottom, and then my Cuisinart actually has a little hole in the chute, and you pour oil in it, and the hole is the right size that it drizzles it for you, which is super neat. The honey and the mustard are going to really kind of keep that together. This is a blended oil that we use at the restaurant. It's olive, grapeseed, and avocado. You could use extra virgin oil. I mean, most of your oils out there are not real super great for you, so I try to use olive oil. Grapeseed oil is good. I try to steer away from like your canolas and things like that. They don't really bring a lot of flavor to the party. And some of those oils are a little over processed, so I try to use like a little bit more expensive oil when I make something like this. Check that for balance. You want the acidity and the sweetness and the saltiness and the punctuation of the mustard to be, tasting good by itself, so that way when you dress the salad with it, it of course all tastes great together. To combine, we're going to just take the grains, put that in the bowl. That I've already cooked with salt, so I don't really need to season at this point. Use a little bit of the vinaigrette to season the grains. I'm going to combine with the cucumber. We're going to put a little bit of our pomegranate kernels inside. We're going to pretend that we put the grilled eggplant inside, even though this one's not going in there because it's raw. Okay, so this base goes in the bottom of the bowl. And then over the top, we're going to scatter our radishes, our herbs, a little bit more of those pomegranate kernels, and then just drizzle a little bit more of that dressing over the top of each one right before you send it out, so that it stays nice and fresh and crisp on top. Okay? I'm going to give them a little push to get this out. Basically, what I want to do is just talk about how to season a chicken for the grill or the smoker. And then we're going to use a Dutch oven and some veggies from the farm to bring that all together into a kind of a light broth to give a base to the sauce. Right now, the grill that we're using outside, the asado grill, it doesn't have a cover. So we're using a Dutch oven with a lid. If you were doing it in a offset smoker or something that's enclosed, a Weber, a Traeger, anything like that, you could easily do that just in a big open skillet with high sides and just let that kind of cook open, and it'll actually keep the chicken skin a little bit more crisp if you put all the pieces of the chicken so the skin is facing up. But in this instance, we're going to use the Dutch oven just to kind of get it all coming together. So we're going to walk through that, and then I've got it, we've got it coasting in the back here. We're going to transition out to the grill at some point, so we'll talk about the elements that I'm going to be taking out there and do a little bit of simple prep. So we'll walk through the table quickly. So we have some seasonal veg. Right now we have, we have the best of both worlds in Florida because we have winter produce and summer produce and spring produce and like whatever produce you want we have. So I associate okra normally with like, the hottest part of summer when everything else is dying or dead or done. And you look out there and that okra is just shining. It's like, it's living its best life when everything else is just dead and gone. And this particular one that Diane grows here is a red okra. It's one of the heirloom varieties that she grows here. And these guys are best when you get the medium-sized one. They're nice and tender. The bigger ones, the bigger they get, you just cook them a little bit more. The bigger ones are more for like gumbo and pickles and things like that. They're real little guys, if you find any. Let's see here. The thinner, small ones. Stuff like this. This actually you can saute or use a cast iron pan and just kind of rock them in a hot pan with just a little drop of oil and just kind of char or blister the outside just so that they're barely warm through. Is just another delicious way to enjoy okra. So we're going to use that. Some of these snap beans. So we have some wax beans and some green beans. I'm not sure 100% what variety these are, these blue legs, or what variety they may be, but snap beans and shell peas and that type of thing is all usually like midsummer. So we're going to incorporate that in to some chicken, and we're going to use a little bit of onion and pepper. I have a jalapeno, some country bacon, which, as the recipe states, is optional. I feel sorry if you don't use it, but if you don't, I understand. Before I moved to Florida, I actually, my family and I, we lived in Tennessee for a few years. I had taken a chef job in East Tennessee because I was working for Danielle prior to that in Las Vegas. And that restaurant actually it ran the course of its contract and it came to a close. And the opportunity for me to stay with Danielle was to go to New York. And, I took the call and I didn't really give an answer, but I hung up the phone and I thought, okay, New York City. I got 2 kids. I got 3 dogs. I got 2 cars. It ain't gonna happen. I need to move to the country. And I really, at that point, had never lived in the South, but I was kind of smitten with Southern cuisine and, the history behind it and a lot of the technique. And it just, it has such a rich food culture. That's not to say that other places don't have equally so, but I was really drawn to it. And one of the things that, everybody associates, bourbon and whiskey and all of those things to Appalachia. But for me, when I think of Appalachia, country ham is kind of the thing that comes to mind. So when I lived in Tennessee, I lived about 20 minutes away from a place called Benton's Country Ham. And Alan Benton turned out to be, I don't know if I could call him a role model because he probably doesn't even know who I am, but I just thought that what he did, he was the best at, and he had made a life of it and given something that was, a very significant part of the food culture there in a way that was going to preserve it and perpetuate that. So even though I live down in South Florida, I still call him up, 321 area code, and I said, hey, send me a box of bacon. So they do. And so I have some of his country cured bacon. And what that means is that this bacon has been dry cured. So it's been hand rubbed with brown sugar and salt. It's been allowed to equalize for a week on salt. And then it's hung for 3 weeks to cure before it goes into the smokehouse. And if you ask Alan how long he smokes stuff for, I think that he exaggerates a little bit, but he says that he smokes his bacon for a week. And if you get it on you, like I'm handling this right now, my hands are still going to smell like bacon tomorrow. But good stuff and brings a lot of flavor to the party, especially if you're cooking things like beans, black-eyed peas and all of that. A little piece of this goes a long way. Or you can also cut it up into some chunks and leave it into the dish as part of the garnish as well. So I'll run through this stuff just quickly. The last thing I have is a chicken. I've already split it in half, but I'll show you just how to break it down a little bit further so that it's ready for the grill. We'll transition out to the grill and get this thing in the Dutch oven so it's all settled up and ready to go. Since we have the plancha hot outside, we're going to actually be searing it. In the recipe, it says that you can smoke it until it starts to get browned. You can just as easily use a flat grill to brown the pieces before incorporating that into the stew. So the thing that you want to do is basically all of your work needs to be done in advance. So if you're going to snap beans, break them into bite-sized pieces. We're going to take a couple things out to the grill with us to make the base of the sauce. I already gave away my secret with the chicken bouillon. This one's pretty good too, if you like beer. If you don't like beer, don't be shy to use wine when it comes to braising something, making a simple sauce. As long as it's going to cook briefly, it's going to take the kind of the edge off of it as far as the alcohol flavor. And a beer such as this isn't intensely bitter. Okay, a lot of these beers that they're drinking nowadays, they have a lot of hops in them. They're called things like hazy IPA and all of those magical names. They're real strong, and they're not real food friendly, and I don't encourage you to really cook with them, nor drink them, but that's my opinion. So to use something like this on the grill, normally like cold beer and grilling kind of, tends to coexist a lot. So we're going to use a little bit of that just to moisten the pan once we get everything incorporated into it. Also, to deglaze, we have a little bit more of that cider vinegar. I'm going to use a spoon of tomato paste to kind of get that down inside and give a little bit of acidity and body to that sauce. We're going to use this onion, garlic, pepper, jalapeno to make the base of it. And then on the chicken itself, we're going to just apply a little bit of a rub. If you have a barbecue rub that you love, use it. If you like Lowry's, use it. If you like Tony Chachere's, use it. This is one that we make at the restaurant. This is basically a jerk rub. So this has a little bit of onion. It has all of the spices, allspice, all of the spices like allspice. Nutmeg. It has a little bit of clove in it. This has a healthy amount of sugar in the raw, or turbinado sugar, which I like the sweetness, but it also caramelizes really well on the grill. So we're going to play with that on the chicken skin itself before it goes into the pot. We're not going to season the whole dish with it, but just use that on the chicken. And then we already talked about the chicken. Chicken, if you can find them, try to buy the ones that are smaller size. Depends on how many people you're feeding, but typically like a 3-pound chicken is plenty of food for, for 2 hungry people or 4, people on a lighter meal. The larger chickens typically, they're a little bit more, take a little bit longer to cook, but also they, sometimes they're not so nice. But anyway, so we're going to mount all of this kit up, and I'm going to chop the veg real quick before we do that, and cut the chicken. This is something, if you have an outdoor kitchen, and you have a cutting board next to your grill, or an island, or a cart, you could easily just bring all of this stuff right outside and just kind of enjoy the vibe while you're doing all of that. Just remember, faster, smaller, slower, bigger. So if you want things to have a little bit more texture when you're doing your soups and braise and things like that, leave bigger pieces. If you want them to be chunky and have a little bit more presence in the dish, use bigger pieces. If you want them to be well integrated, then just cut them up very small. And also when it comes to flavoring things, the more surface area that you give to your aromatics, the more readily they will render their flavor. You guys ever use these kind of knives? It's a cheap knife. Chefs are really on some high quality cutlery nowadays, but this has kind of been my go-to. It's a 10.5-inch Victorinox serrated slicer. It's basically a bread knife, but as you can see, I'm pretty capable with it, and I've never had to stop and sharpen this thing, which is really helpful. Because the nicer the knife, the more you have to care for it, and some of those knives, especially the really high-end steel, they need almost as much sharpening as they spend time cutting.
But they're pretty.
I had a new cook in the kitchen recently, and we have a lot of knives at my restaurant, and they're all in a big blue toolbox. And after he had been there a few weeks, I noticed that every knife in the whole house was dull, and I was kind of paying attention to who was actually going through all those knives, and I found out that it was the new guy. So I stopped and talked to him for a little bit, and I said, you know, the knives, you got to learn to sharpen the knife just like you got to learn to use the knife, and it's a little bit of both, and you have to learn how to make knife cuts, but you also have to learn how to keep the knife up. And his response to me is, oh, I just need a good knife. And I said, you need to learn how to sharpen a knife. That's really, that's the more powerful skill. You can buy some, I've got some really high-end knives, and honestly, they're as good as that initial edge, and then after that, they're about all the same if you can't keep up with them. So I have all of that cut up kind of small. This is kind of all in bulk there, which will get sorted back out at the grill. If you were going to leave the bacon into the dish, cut it up into some cubes that are not going to be too hard to chew. You could also leave one big piece in and then take it out. They do that a lot with salt pork. But this type of bacon, I really enjoy to eat it, so I cut it up to where I can actually leave it in the dish. Okay, and then lastly, I wanted to touch on the chicken. So I've already split it, and basically, I'll get this thing out here in front of me. Once you split it, which the easiest way to do that is you have a pair of poultry shears. You can just cut down the backbone on both sides, take that out, and then break it on the breastbone, and then just cut that right out there. These we prep them in bulk at the restaurant, so I thought I would have a whole chicken for the demo today, and when I reached for them, they had already been split, so I'm really sorry about that step being skipped. But basically, what we want to do from this point is just to cut it in half. You could definitely cook it just like this. It makes serving a little bit more efficient because then one person, one piece. But if you wanted to share it, or if you wanted to enjoy a little bit of dark meat and a little bit of white meat, you would want to go ahead and further break it down. So you could do your wing, your thigh, and then you can always cut through the breast also, and that would be, they would call that a 10-way chicken with the breast being split. So we have 5 pieces from the half. What we'll do with this is use a little touch of, no, we're not going to. We're going to use a little drop of vinegar because the bottle of oil is left the building. In barbecue, they typically tend to use some sort of moist ingredient to make sure that you have good adhesion on your seasoning and rub. In barbecue, they typically use things like mustard, super flavorful, but it doesn't really have to be anything that's going to be really obvious. One that I like to use in my kitchen is browning sauce. They call it Kitchen Bouquet or Gravy Master or all these funny names that I didn't really know what that was until I saw it at I think my grandma had it in her kitchen and was using it when she was making sausage gravy, just to kind of give it a little bit of flavor. But it's basically caramelized sugar and vegetables, and it just kind of is a really flavorful thing. But if you sprinkle a little bit of that on there and kind of lather that on, it'll help your rub stick. And also, if you use the browning sauce, it'll give you a good color, especially if you're doing a braise or something like this of a stew. So we're going to just liberally apply that. And I'm pretty much done with my cutting board. Otherwise, I would highly advise using another vessel to season your chicken, but that's the last thing I'm going to do here. So once that's seasoned there, we'll transfer it over, and we're going to mosey out to the grill and get this in a pot, and I'll step back into the kitchen and send this out to y'all. Okay? Head out. Oh, get that. Ready to? You want to snap some beans? Yep. I really like this whole situation out here. So we have the Dutch oven. This is one of the Lodge. It's an, you know, I'd like to say that it's American made, but I'm not 100% sure. That Lodge is a American company, but these are usually a very good value as opposed to some of the French, like Le Creuset and all of that. They do a really nice job, and we use these in the restaurant. So this is basically a shallow Dutch oven. So I have that on the flat grill here, and it's already preheated. The first thing I'm going to do is add the bacon to that. And then at the same time, I'm going to take the chicken skin down and start to sear that off to the side. And this baby is nice and hot. My main man, Lee, is out here. Lee built all of this stuff, and he's also out here stoking the fires all night so that I can do this quick demo for y'all. So thank you, Lee. Appreciate that.
Anytime, bro.
So the bacon will start to go quickly, and you don't really want to make the bacon. A lot of people, when they put bacon in the base of a dish, they start to cook it until it's completely rendered. But what that'll do is make it very tough and chewy. So what you want to do is just basically keep it moving until it lightly sears all of the sides. And then as we begin to incorporate other things into it, it'll continue to render its fat, but it'll stay much more tender. If you really hammer the bacon up front, it really takes an awful long time to braise out to the point where it's tender. If you were going to do collard greens, you could probably do it that way because collards cook all day on the stove. So you see the intensity of the heat on this particular grill. The chicken skin is already nicely colored, so we're going to start to work into the skillet. With the bacon, we're going to start to put all of that pepper, jalapeno, onion, and garlic. And just keep that moving. We'll do this kind of on an abbreviated timeline. Normally you'd want this to sweat a little bit more, start to break down, and then we're going to incorporate a big spoon of the tomato paste into that. And that'll start to stick to the bottom of that skillet, and it'll actually start to brown on the bottom, which is what you want. The dish that we're going to be sending you in the dining room tonight has some black-eyed peas, some fresh shelled black-eyed peas from the farm in it, which are absent from the demo. Those need to be boiled in advance. So if you have the fresh black-eyed peas, they cook in about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. If you have an Instant Pot or something like that, you can cook them in much less time. But they just need to be cooked until they're, you know, creamy inside. Otherwise, it's taking a little bit longer than it takes the chicken, so those peas may still be a little bit chalky. The next thing we're going to do is a little bit of this finest barley, rice, yeast, hops, and water, just to moisten it. I'm not going to drown everything in beer. If I was using wine, I would say the same. You're not going to drown it in there. You're going to use that to moisten the bottom of this dish. The vegetables are going to give a lot of water. The chicken is going to give a lot of water. So you don't want the beer to overwhelm those flavors. You want that to just serve as the vehicle for all of that. So the chicken is browned. I'll place that into the skillet. Come on, baby. You would think that that jerk rub with all the sugar and everything would stick like heck, but this thing is so hot that it doesn't really even hold on to anything. We're going to incorporate all of those beautiful snap beans and some of the okra. The okra, you could easily put it inside like this, or if you wanted to get fancy, when the chicken is almost done, you put the okra over here and char it on the plancha a little bit, and that gives a little bit more intense flavor and gives a little bit of a different texture. So once that's all inside, last thing we're going to do is just hit it with a little bit of that cider vinegar. It's already got that tomato paste in there, so you don't need a ton. The chicken rub itself should have enough salt to carry the dish along with the bacon. So we're going to cover that. Normally this type of prep on chicken, if you bring it up to a boil, I would start checking it after about 45 minutes. Once it's brought to a boil, push it off to the side and let it simmer. Sometimes chicken can take 90 minutes. If it's an extremely old or large chicken, you can cook those things like upwards of 2 hours, 2.5 hours. But on a smaller chicken like this that's been cut up in 10 pieces, I would say 45 minutes is where I would start to check and make sure that it's not only cooked through, but make sure that it's tender on the bone so that you can enjoy it just with a fork and you don't have to try to pick it up or cut it off of the bone. You want it to yield under the fork just so that you can enjoy that in a nice bowl with all of that brothy vegetables all together there. Okay, so that's basically the dish. I'm going to hop back into the kitchen and send this out to y'all. Thank you.
On the phone at Kai's Music Garden.
Basically, these guys, you know, they're pretty ubiquitous down here. I think they do a little bit better in the hot weather than some of the other pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns that come from up north, but they're really versatile. You can do, you know, anything with this that you could do with, you know, butternut squash or sweet potato for that matter. You can stuff it, roast it, steam it, fry it. You can do a lot of different stuff with this, but typically, you know, these things play really well with, you know, those spices, those fragrant spices. So my idea was to use the calabaza and make a little bit of pumpkin spice and incorporate that into an empanada. So the steps for that are pretty simple. Another big time saver is empanada dough. A lot of the things that you see that are made in high-end restaurants, although that they do a lot of the work that goes into it, there's typically products that are just impractical to produce. Phyllo dough, brick dough, puff pastry, spring roll wrapper, egg roll wrapper, empanada wrapper, those types of things. Don't hesitate to buy things like that. Those are the things that, you know, you'll always find that it's typically better bought than you could make yourself. And I'm saying that from experience because I like to try to make everything from scratch. Like pita bread, really hard to make a good one from scratch, but it's easy to buy, you know, if you like dipping meze and all of that type of thing. But this in particular, you know, this one you can find in most of the freezer section that you can find this. You can buy it in bulk in places like Restaurant Depot and whatnot. But this in particular has a little piece of cellophane between each disc of dough, which is super helpful because they can get a little bit frustrating to deal with. So that's kind of why I like that. Plus the consistency comes out really nicely. We're going to roast the calabaza to make the filling for that. And then we're going to make a second filling, which is already pre-made, so I'll spare you that. This is basically cheesecake batter. So this is a pound of cream cheese that's been beaten with a half a cup of sugar. It's got a spoon of vanilla paste in it, or you could use a vanilla extract, or if you like scraping the beans, you could put that in there. And then the spice itself is based on 3 parts of cinnamon, 1 part of allspice, and then a half a part of clove, and a half a part of ground ginger. So that's that. I like to play with the spiced rum around the holidays. Just my thing. Starting now with the pumpkin pies, butternut squash pies, things like that. And then Thanksgiving weekend, the thing to do is make your fruitcakes. And then every week until Christmas, you give them a little on there and keep turning them over, and it'll take that rum. You make some of the best fruitcakes like that. When I was a kid, I had it was like a Martha Stewart magazine, something that I should be embarrassed to have been reading. But I found an article about fruitcakes, and it was basically like 5 different holiday fruitcakes. And one of the ones in there was just basically spiced rum and all of those big chunky dried fruits and nuts and things like that. And the prescription was to make it Thanksgiving weekend and then bathe it with the rum weekly until Christmas. While it's wrapped in muslin, and if you have an attic and you live up north, you can keep it there, or that kind of stuff, like old-timey kind of folklore stuff. But you could definitely do this in the fridge, or if you have a wine fridge at home, that's actually the perfect temperature so that that fruit is kind of macerating in there. The Som always loved me because I had my little projects in the cellar at the restaurant a lot. And sometimes they would go awry, like the ramp kimchi really took over one night, but you know. Those things do really well. Those things do really well in that cellar temperature. So basically, you guys know the drill as far as getting into one of these. It's not easy. I wanted to point out one thing, because in another application that we really like to do is to make a stuffed pumpkin, which you don't want to cut it like this if you're going to stuff it. But what I wanted to point out is that the top of the pumpkin is actually the thick part. Okay, so if you're ever going to stuff a pumpkin, turn it upside down, cut the bottom out, and stuff it. Okay, because that's going to give you a good strong base, and you can move it about to put it on a serving tray. The good stuffed pumpkin is made with sourdough bread, Gruyere cheese, bacon, cream, onions, shallots, pick thyme, black pepper. It's like stuffing in a pumpkin. Yeah, very good this. Yep. Yeah, I've actually served them here. My chef, Danielle, is from Lyon, fancy place, inside of another fancy place. But that was one of the kind of homey things that he did, and it's kind of like one of his family recipes that they did in the hearth, was to take the leftover torn bread and stuff it down into the pumpkin, put all of those aromatics, top it off with cream until it was full, and then big handfuls of Gruyere cheese and put it into the bread oven. And I just thought that was like the cat's meow. So we didn't do that at all tonight. I'm sorry. I really talked it up too much. We're going in a completely different direction. You got to cook it at a moderate temperature, so like 300 degrees for a couple hours, until it completely cooks through. That's the idea, is that you're kind of enjoying it all together. And it's like a showpiece, so like you could take that to the table and serve it right out of the pumpkin. Beautiful stuff. It breaks my heart that I didn't do it tonight, but to cut the calabaza down into some pieces that are manageable, just to make a roasted squash. Take those guts out. Put it onto a tray with foil. Make sure to use foil. Everybody's on the parchment paper nowadays because it's fancy on TV and stuff, but here's the difference between foil and paper. Foil will brown the bottoms of things. Paper steams the bottoms of things. So you use a piece of parchment paper under there, you pick it up, it's always going to be wet. And it's not going to color because it's not conductive. Okay, so you use foil for your roasting. If you're doing potatoes and things like that, put them on foil because the bottoms of them will roast readily instead of steam. Okay? Just another pearl of wisdom there. So the squash needs to be cut down into small enough pieces that it will cook relatively quickly, also giving it enough surface area that while it roasts, it'll lose a lot of its moisture, because these can be really water-laden, and you don't want the puree or the pulp that you're going to put into your dessert to be too wet, because it's not going to be nice for you to enjoy. So cut these up, oil, salt, pepper. If you're going to do a savory spin on it, or if you're going to do a sweet, just use a little bit of butter and some of that spice, brush it on there into a hot oven, 400, 425, until you can pierce it with no resistance whatsoever, and then let it go another while longer to concentrate and to cook off some of that moisture, okay? You want to actually make that a little bit more intense. You don't want to just have it just cook through. You want to actually have it cook down. Okay, so we're going to make that piece. Once that comes out of the oven, it would be just chopped coarsely by hand. And then we have the cheesecake filling also. We have the dough. Clean up my area. Empanada? I'd say it's more of a recent thing for me because we started taking our brisket trim at the restaurant and making brisket empanadas with queso, and we fry them in the fryer. They're really good. But this is something that is super versatile. So if you want to make a sweet, you make a sweet. If you want to make a savory, you make a savory. If you have stuff left over, you could wrap it up in here and make an empanada. You can do it for breakfast. The really good one is soft scrambled eggs with a little bit of cheese folded into it. Put it in here. You make the little egg and cheese empanada. You put a little ham in there too. It's quite good. But you know, like in Tennessee, they make hand pies. You know, it's kind of like a real homey thing, and that just kind of reminded me of the idea of that. So we have the disc of dough here. We have an egg wash just made from a cracked egg with a couple spoons of water. And what we're going to do is just run this around the perimeter. You don't really need to egg wash the whole thing, just where it's going to be sealed. The filling, you guys are going to have to use your imagination with me. So the cheesecake filling, it would be 1/2. And then the crushed pumpkin would be the other half, okay? Basically, once the filling is inside, you're going to pull it towards yourself and match the seam up all the way around. See, you can't even tell there's no pumpkin inside. Okay? Now, using the backside of a fork, just like if you're making a ravioli, you're going to press quite firmly to seal the edges there, and you need to press to where the fork is making a pretty deep mark, to where it's actually blending those two doughs into a good seam there. Did I talk about the pumpkin once it comes out of the oven, to put a little bit of this guy in there? It's on the recipe. So once it comes out of the oven and you put it into a bowl, put a little splash of your rum, some of your pumpkin spice, and some brown sugar into that. It really depends on if you like it more sweet. You can put a lot of sugar. If you like it more savory, you can put a lot less. The rum you can easily omit, but for me, I just like that. And then, you know, if you like to play with the spice, you can do that. You could even play with a little bit of like ancho, or like those types of flavors work really well with those hard squash. And they work well with cheese and vanilla and all of that, so I could see how that could be very delicious also. Before this, your turn is up. Veggie burgers are never hard to make, and if you buy veggie burgers and read the labels, they usually have a lot of things that help them to mass produce them, you know, just because they need to have a certain level of durability in a commercial application. But in a small setting, if you're able to just work with things that are starchy, you know, like the grains are good. If you use peas, like garbanzo beans, things that just have a little bit of tackiness to them, that's typically enough that you can bind it. People sometimes try to make veggie burgers at home and they get a little bit disappointed because there's too much water in them, so they get kind of like a sloppy Joe texture instead of a burger texture. But the workaround for that is put your oven on 300, make your veggie burger mixture, make the patties, put the patties on the tray like this, bake them for 20 minutes. Then take it out, put it on the grill or in the pan and cook it like a burger patty, and that's going to cook off that water and give it a firmer texture, which is how we made ours. So it was pattied, then baked, and then we would actually pick it up on the flat top, melt the cheese and all that. That was a beautiful thing. Thank you for bringing that up. But about the egg inside, Mario Batali once said that he was in Italy learning how to make pasta, and he attempted to dip his finger in the egg and put it on the ravioli, and Nona was there and was like, "What are you doing?" And he was like, "I'm using this to make the ravioli." And it's just too toothsome to use the egg because of the protein inside, and you just need to learn to, work quickly with that dough while it still has its, that innate tackiness to it. You really don't need to use it. But for me, it's just, especially if we're working in a production setting where we're making lots, it just helps things out a little bit, just to give, a little bit of an advantage. Egg wash the tops of those. And then I have some sugar with our homemade pumpkin spice. That's going to go on that guy like that. And the last thing that you have to do, because if you don't, you'll be sorry, you have to cut vents, okay? So basically like 3 small slits, and into the oven it will go. And we have them here ready to send out, okay? I'm gonna send this out and then I'll clean up a little bit, and if we'd like to, we can do a little bit of Q&A, but that concludes my demo. I hope you enjoyed everything. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Chefs in the kitchen, turning up the heat for the feast. We'll be dancing to a reggae song, jamming to the rhythm all night long. Cooking in the kitchen, rocking on the phone at Kai's Music Garden.